Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto What If stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. He jolted into awareness with a feeling similar to missing a step or dreaming of falling, only without the physical jolt, which made sense because he appeared to be missing a body. What? He asked. Somehow you are dead. The booming voice explained helpfully. Your identity has been stripped from you for ease of processing. Well, that answered several questions and raised many more. The most prominent of which Optimus Prime, he asked, staring at the giant mech. At least he still felt male vaguely. It was weird not being able to connect any of your memories to a firm sense of self. No, this is merely the form you perceive when you think of the divine. That didn't sound right. While he might not remember his name right now, he was pretty sure that he had never been a big fan of the Transformers franchise. Certainly not enough to consider Optimus Prime a god. Calling the being out on it seemed like a bad idea, though. Okay, so I'm dead. Now what? You have lived an unimpressive and inoffensive life and died an equally unimpressive and inoffensive death. Your passing barely noticed. Your karmic balance is sufficient to allow you some input into your reincarnation. Cool, he said, taking no offense at being called unimpressive. People underestimated how much effort went into flying under the radar. Then I'd like to request rebirth into a wealthy family that won't expect me to put much effort into anything. That request is within your karmic reach. Prepare for insertion. Already celestial bureaucracy sure did run smoothly. XXX. He felt himself settling in an expected awareness of his past life and brief time in limbo to fade, but it didn't. Rather worrisome insofar as he was capable of worrying right now. From what he was able to discern during his moments of lucidity, he was currently in his new mother's womb and spent most of his time drifting in a haze. Similar to that pleasant state in between sleep and wakefulness. The circumstances were rather reversed. However, whereas being pleasantly sleepy in the morning was a state that was easily broken and almost impossible to grasp once lost, now it was incredibly hard to focus, and he kept slipping into the haze. Sometimes he could hear muffled conversation around him, but for the most part, time passed in a fluid haze. It seemed like no time at all before he was feeling a strange urgency, something pushing him down a slimy tunnel. The whole experience was horrible. Never mind the knowledge that he was being squeezed out of his new mother's vagina. Everything was too bright and cold and hard. His baby brain couldn't process the sensation overload and went into shock. It was only the smack across his bottom that snapped him out of it, being so unexpected that he immediately began crying on sheer instinct. Then he was cleaned and deposited into his new mother's arms. He's beautiful, Yoshino, a woman said softly in Japanese, which he somehow understood. What are you going to call him? Am I in Japan? He tried to squint at the speaking woman to see her, but his baby eyes weren't up to the task. He was as blind as a bat, and the light was still painful. Shikamaru, his new mother said softly. That's what Shikaku told me. He wanted to name his son. Before Shikamaru, Shikaku, the infant, froze in place, no longer listening to the conversation around him. The name Yoshino hadn't really rung too many bells. But the addition of Shikamaru and Shikaku definitely did. Combined with the being in limbo taking the shape of Optimus Prime, who he now realized could transform into a truck. That God thing I seed me, and he was mocking me the whole time. As it turned out, the electrochemical system of an infant was not good at handling rage either. So, he burst into loud, teary wails again. Oh my, he sure is energetic. The other woman chuckled. How out of character for Inara. Well, that settled it beyond all doubt. He'd been reincarnated into Narikamaru, who did, in hindsight, technically fulfill the parameters he had given the Optimus Prime impersonator. Son of a maybe he's hungry. And then his mouth was filled with titty, so maybe things could be worse. As the ancient wisdom went, world hard and cold, titty soft and warm. XXX Shikamaru. He didn't bother fighting the name, seeing as his past identity and all earthly attachments connected to it had been thoroughly wiped by the God thing, stared contemplatively at the ceiling. Finally able to think clearly, an infant brain simply could not support the complexity of a full-grown adult's thoughts. Shikamaru had to reinforce his own brain with what little chakra he was able to muster just to keep his undeveloped neurons from firing off signals like an orc with a brand new shooter at the slightest distraction. He had no idea how long it had taken him to muster enough lucidity to manage that one, but suspected that it was more than just a few days. His memory since his birth was basically a Swiss cheese collection of fleeting moments. Getting a handle on his chakra at least had been almost absurdly easy. Even if his identity had been scrubbed clean, he did still vaguely recall what his old body had felt like. And both the chakra coils and the 8 gates in this new one stood out like a beacon. While he had no interest in fooling around with the latter, he absolutely was interested in chakra superpowers. Recalling that the secret was to combine spiritual energy with physical, he had focused all his limited and often flighty mental capacity on that goal. The task was fortunately easy, as the balance was heavily skewed in favor of the spiritual for obvious reasons, which roughly translated to easy to do, hard to power. There was no telling how long it took him to figure out that and then basic chakra reinforcement, but he was at least able to think at an adult level again. Feeling your thoughts slip away no matter how hard you tried to keep hold of them was scary. Of course, that meant that he was now an infant with adult cognition, which equated to serious boredom. Shikamaru wondered if a baby with enough motor control to master walking soon after being born and enough skill at chakra reinforcement to pull it off would be too suspicious. Yeah, probably. XXXXX. Aren't you going to open it? Yamanaka Enonoi prompted gently. Naru Yoshino took her eyes away from the envelope that held answers to a burning question she'd had for months, ever since it became undeniable that she was pregnant. I don't even know what I'm hoping this test will tell me. She admitted women did not spontaneously get pregnant without sleeping with a man. Yet, that seemed to be what had happened to her. Either someone had messed with her memory or something even stranger was going on. No matter what it says, we'll be there for you. After Shikaku's death, he and Showa had made sure to look after their teammates' young widow. And this whole situation was extremely strange. All right, Yoshino breathed out and opened the envelope, reading over the results of the paternity test done on Shikimaru. What is it? Inoichi asked with concern after seeing the shocked look on her face. She silently handed him the papers to read. Enonoi had been expecting all sorts of things. Konoha kept a medical record on all of its shinobi. So if one of them had gotten Yoshino pregnant, the paternity test would show it. He had been bracing himself for news that somehow had hypnotized her with their sharing, or that even one of his own clansmen had used their mental techniques to suppress her memories. It might have even been something else entirely. But what he had absolutely not expected was to see the test saying that there was a 99% chance that Shikamaru's father was Shikaku, a man dead for over 2 years now. This is impossible, Enonoi said, bewildered. Shikaku died 2 years ago. Yoshino had regained some of her wits by then and could only scowl angrily. The test has to be wrong. Konoha's doctors and medicine are very good at this stuff. They wouldn't make a mistake like this. Eniki denied with a frown. Well, have it done again, of course. But something tells me the results will be the same. So, what did my dead husband impregnate me from beyond the grave or something? Yoshino demanded. I don't know. He really didn't. But whatever the case may be, he and Shuza were going to need to keep an even closer eye on Yoshino, especially if Shikamaru really was their fallen teammate's son. XXX Shikamaru was absurdly pleased when he finally managed to start crawling without the need for chakra reinforcement. Doing it only in secret in the dark of night, the times when most infants were obliterating their parents' sleep schedules with their incessant crying was perhaps a bit too ninja. Speaking of parents, his father had apparently died 2 years ago, which he was quite sure was not what happened in the anime. His new mother talked to him a lot. One of the things she mentioned being her baffling pregnancy God thing had pulled an immaculate conception type of deal on him. Small mercies that the elemental nations had no equivalent to the Christian mythos, or else he might have accidentally usurped Naruto's place as Ninja Jesus. That would have been in the tradition of the Nar family a real drag. Almost as much of a drag as trying to pretend that he was having fun on this arranged play date with Choji and Ino. They might be cute kids, with the slightly older Choji being hilariously pudgy and Ino being almost unbearably adorable with her bright blonde hair and huge teal eyes. Clearly, the three of them were already being groomed as a team for their future as child soldiers. Shikamaru would have happily settled for life as a civilian despite his inner Egil demanding that he master shadow manipulation. Fighting superpowered lunatics did not at all sound like his cup of tea. Alas, he rather doubted that was in the cards for him. His mother frequently received visits from Yamanaka Inoichi and Akamaiki Showa, and they said all sorts of things around a baby that they didn't think could understand them, such as the fact that news of his inexplicable existence had reached the Konoha Shinobi Council and the Hokage, or the fact that he had an unusually large chakra capacity for such a young child. Yeah, no duh. Even aside from his head start as an apparent isekai character, all the practice he'd been doing just to stave off boredom had some effect. Although to be fair, not all of it was out of boredom. For a powerless shut-in from a world with no powers, the lure of chakra superpowers was just a bit too much to resist. Anyway, the Yamanaka and Akamaiki clans had immediately closed ranks with the Nar, who were very zealous indeed in their protection of him now that it was known that he was somehow the son of their late clan head. To prevent any old farts from getting too curious about him with the support of first the Yandami and now the reinstated Sandame Hokage. Oh yes, the Kobe debacle had also happened in the meanwhile. That had been fun. In any case, Shikamaru wasn't in immediate danger of being whisked away to some secret underground facility and having the humanity beaten out of him, but a life of ease and leisure was not in the cards for him. Plus, there was that whole thing with Moa and Kaya. Nar could probably use a bit of a leg up on that to make sure he won that fight. Sasaki, too, with how much of an emotional underscore he was. He strongly suspected that the Optimus Prime impersonator had deliberately made his birth so attention-grabbing so that he wouldn't be able to dodge out of the excitement. Son of a underscore, look at him go, Shoi's mother said admiringly. Never thought I'd be seeing a Nar baby so energetic. Maybe you should try it yourself sometime, fatso. Shikamaru thought unkindly. It was petty and unfair, but he was already sick to death of being a toddler, and insulting people in the privacy of his mind was one of the few ways he had to vent frustration. What was that quote again? Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in your thoughts. Oh well, as long as he didn't mean it, then it should be fine. It's really strange. His own mother shook her head. When he was born, he was a very quiet and calm baby. He never cried unless he was hungry or needed a diaper change and rarely woke me up at night. There was a palpable aura of pure jealousy radiating from the other two women. But as soon as he was able to lift himself up, he started moving around like his life depended on it. Yoshino continued obliviously. Looks like Ino doesn't want him getting away. Said baby's mother giggled, noticing the determined look on the tiny blonde's face as she tried to emulate his crawl technique. Shikamaru started crawling circles around her to taunt her further. Not that anyone realized he was taunting her. It was something to do. XXX age 7, the age of enrollment into the Shinobi Academy. For Shikamaru, it was the age when he received conclusive proof that he was not going to be able to take it easy. His mother had enrolled him without so much as mentioning any alternatives, and he had overheard enough conversations about the council's interest in his development to know that no real alternatives existed. Plus, there was a rather large amount of expectations being levied on his shoulders as the heir to the Nar clan. You'd think that with Shikaku's death, the line of succession would have shifted to someone else and that they would be upset at having it stolen from them by the freak appearance of a magic baby that shouldn't exist. But this was the N, the clan of notoriously lazy bastards. They were all too happy to dump the responsibility on him. Come on, Shikamaru. Stop daydreaming, Ino huffed, poking him in the side. We have to find our class. We still have plenty of time. He replied calmly and snatched her hand when she tried poking him again. I was just admiring the architecture. It was singularly unimpressive architecture. Ino huffed again and pulled her hand away with a blush. Well, are you done doing that? Shikamaru gave the front of the building an unnecessarily intense look and slowly nodded. Yes, let's go. He had never actually stopped messing with Ino for his own amusement. To his left, Shoji snickered but quickly shut up when the blonde girl shot him a scathing look. Once they made it to the classroom, Shikamaru scanned those of his future classmates that were already there. Only a few stood out. Two timid ill-looking girls, one pink-haired and the other with the distinctively creepy white eyes of the Hyuga. Sakura and Hinata, a boy wearing sunglasses and a high-collared jacket. Shino, a boy with black eyes and dark hair that spiked in the back. Sasaki, a very distinctive blue-eyed blonde with whisker marks on his cheeks. Nar. The others all seemed like irrelevant extras, which meant that Ka was probably not here yet. That seemed in character for the Inuzuka. Let's go sit over there, Shikamaru said and led the three of them towards Nar. In accordance with the rules of shonen manga, the stronger the protagonist, the less work had to be done by the support cast. He would be perfectly happy just staying on the sidelines and commenting about how powerful everyone was. So, it behooved him to make the Jinchuriki as strong as possible. Ino and Choji didn't object, automatically following his lead. That had always been the case with them. Shikamaru, taking command by simple dint of the fact that he had an adult's maturity and composure. Funny, because he hadn't been a terribly responsible and charismatic man back in his previous life. Hi, the Ginuriki nearly shouted in greeting before they even sat down. Imumaki Naruto future Hokage. Shikamaru suppressed to cringe so loud. Even if he knew that this kid was starved for attention, it was still annoying as hell. Hopefully he would calm down eventually. Yo, I'm Nar Shikamaru. Nice meeting you. He replied casually and nodded to his posy. And these are Yamanaka Enino and Akamaiki Choji. Hi, Ino. And Choji waved in greeting, looking a bit dubious about sitting next to the blonde abuser of eardrums, but not saying anything. Nar almost vibrated with excitement and opened his mouth for what was undoubtedly going to be another loud exclamation. It was going to be a long few years getting him to understand that maximum volume wasn't always the way to go. XXXXY you four aren't leaving here until every last drop of paint is gone. Ururuka said sternly. I told you guys this was a bad idea. Shoji sighed despondently, rubbing his stomach. I'm hungry. It couldn't be helped. Shikamaru countered calmly, wiping off the paint with the serenity of a Zen master. What do you mean it couldn't be helped? Sakura yelled from her spot next to Uruka. All you had to do was say no when Naruto suggested this stupid prank. Ino huffed from the teacher's other side. Hey, don't give him all the credit. Ka protested. This was my idea, too. Yeah, right. Ino rolled her eyes. We all know who the real mastermind here was. Ha, you hear that, Ka? Nar boasted. I'm a mastermind. Don't take pride in vandalizing the image of our Hokage. Oruka yelled. Ah, come on. The blonde wed, staring up at the sensei and two girls. We'll never be able to do this kind of thing again after we graduate from the academy. I just wanted to go out with a bang, you know. That was true. Shinobi didn't seem to care much if civilians caused a small ruckus, although they came down on any actual crime like a ton of bricks. And they were especially lenient with kids from ninja clans, but the Shinobi Corps was a military organization. Screwing around once you were a member could get you punished pretty severely, and that's why it couldn't be helped, Shikamaru explained, still in the same calm tone. He was going to do it anyway, and as his friends, we couldn't let him do it alone. Yeah, Choji sighed again. I'm still hungry, though. You're always hungry, though. Ka snickered. You guys, the blonde grinned widely, obviously happy with the support. He was a lot better adjusted thanks to Shikamaru's efforts. You could have tried stopping him, Ino pointed out. When has that ever worked? Shikamaru asked wryly. And it was true. Even at this young age, Naruto was possessed of an unusual charisma. It was raw and unrefined, oftentimes even annoying in how it always drove him to be the center of attention, but it pretended much for the man he might one day become. Ino and Sakura huffed and silently jumped down to join them, helping clean up the Hokage monument, even though they hadn't helped to face it. Shikamaru gave Ino a small smile at the gesture, which widened just a bit further when he spotted the tiny blush on her cheeks. That had been an unexpected development. Apparently, his lack of constant complaining about everything being troublesome and adult maturity had gotten the blonde girl's attention more than Sasuke's brooding. Consequently, she and Sakura had never had their falling out. The butterflies of chaos flap at their wings. Incidentally, Nar being less desperate for some kind of connection to people also meant that he hadn't pestered Sakura for dates constantly, so they mostly got along even if they weren't super close. Right now, Shikamaru honestly wasn't sure if Ino had developed a crush on him instead of Sasaki because of his previous life experience or because the world was simply more real than it had been in the anime. Case in point, the academy had had them killing piglets on a semi-regular basis to desensitize them to killing in preparation for a life as child soldiers. The fickleness of youth tended to not survive that kind of conditioning. Even Sakura was a lot more restrained about her infatuation with Sasaki than she had been in the anime. Of course, that wasn't the only difference. The anime might have presented Konoha's Ninja Academy as a school for youths aspiring to be protectors of the leaf, but from his perspective, it was more of an indoctrination center for child soldiers. Thank goodness that he had never been a moral busybody, or else the continuous outrage he would have been feeling would have given him an aneurysm. Sure, it would be preferable if child soldiers weren't a thing, but it was a shitty world, and being a child not trained for combat was no guarantee of safety. Shikamaru wasn't particularly weirded out by the idea of Ino crushing on him, largely thanks to that same lack of moral starch. Sure, she was 12 right now, but so was he, and neither of them would stay that way for long. He wasn't enough of a masochist to add his previous age to his current physical one. It helped that he had been a perennial bachelor in his past life and not even the type that slept with a lot of women and never committed to any. He'd practically been a monk, although he had at one point wanted a wife and family. One good look at the statistics around divorce and happiness in marriage had told him that he might as well be playing Russian roulette with at least 4 bullets chambered, maybe 5. Even starting off on easy mode was exactly what the doctor ordered. And things were different enough in this world that getting into a relationship didn't feel like walking into a minefield. We should get some ramen after we're done here, Naruto suggested exuberantly. I'd love to, but I can't, Shoi said apologetically. I have to get home. My mom is probably going to be mad enough already. Yeah, Ka winced. I prefer getting my kicked on an empty stomach. I can't either. Sakura also shook her head, but didn't elaborate further. Then I guess it's going to be just me and my 2 blondes. Shikamaru joked and glanced at Uruka. Unless you want to join us, sensei. Thanks for the offer, but I wouldn't want to cramp your style. Uruka joked. Well, hopefully that wouldn't backfire. XXX. So, big day tomorrow. Shikamaru subtly initiated the conversation as they ate their ramen. My first step on the road to becoming Hokage. Nar enthused. Then the village will have to respect me. I still don't understand why they hate you so much. Ino frowned in displeasure. Your pranks aren't that bad. Shikamaru knew exactly why, but he couldn't speak of it. As much as he would like to get Nar started on the road to working together with Kurama, the Kalobi was still an S-rank secret in Konoha, and he didn't want to risk the consequences of sharing it, especially when he wasn't sure he could underscore his way past the pointed questions of how he learned it in the first place. If it got out that he had knowledge of the possible future, who knows what goes through the heads of civilians? He shrugged, playing on the divide between the shinobi and civilian population. While the civilians weren't exactly oppressed, they certainly weren't allowed much of a say in anything either. The Hokage had always understood that a cooperative population was better than a compelled one. But Konoha was still a military dictatorship in the end. It doesn't matter if they don't like me, I'll still protect them. Naruto said firmly. A mindset that had come about from multiple conversations about what the Hoga's job actually was. That's the kind of attitude that makes me think you're the only one in our generation that actually can become Hokage. Shikamaru chuckled. The rest of us have much more modest ambitions. Oh, what kind of ambitions do you have? Shikamaru. Ino asked coyly, leaning over to him from her own stool. Shikamaru spared an amused glance for Nar, who was puffing up with pride at the compliment before pointedly staring the girl in the eyes. Become a powerful shinobi, take over the clan, marry a beautiful girl, and raise some kids. There was no such thing as an age of consent among ninja, and marriages at ages as early as 15 were far from unheard of. It was a brutal world where few reached retirement age, and the social dynamics reflected it. Girls picking out potential future husbands at 12 was entirely normal and not just because of the low life expectancy. Even if chakra was a great equalizer where physical ability was concerned, seduction was still far too potent a tool to be ignored. A lot of the kunoichi in training chased after potential husbands to avoid honeypot missions. Having parents do it for them wasn't unheard of either. Shikamaru suspected that Konoha was a lot kinder about such things than the other villages. He could easily imagine the mist, cloud, rock, and sand ninja not being allowed to refuse such missions given their cage, regardless of marital status. It wasn't just the girls, either. Guys could also be sent on honeypot missions, although it was rarer. That was another reason why he was encouraging Ino's infatuation. Even if neither of them were in a lot of danger of being sent on such missions, being clan heirs, it was better safe than sorry. Plus, it would be another layer of normality over his decidedly abnormal birth. That's a nice dream, Ino said, blushing under his gaze, clearly understanding what he was implying. Was it wrong that he was essentially grooming her to become his wife in the future? Not when they were both 12. His extra 30-some years from his past life didn't count, and anyone who said otherwise could go suck a what else was he supposed to do? Go after women 30 years older than his physical age. What about you, Ino? Nar interrupted the moment. What's your dream? Oh, Ino stammered, clearly flustered. She noticed his amused grin and defaulted to anger. You can't just ask a lady something like that. Huh? Nar responded cluelessly. What did I say? Shikamaru just chuckled and poked Ino in the side. Be nice. You know he didn't mean any harm. After spending the past several years diffusing potential arguments when Naruto got on someone's nerves, he was quite the master at it. Fine. Ino huffed and looked away, cheeks still glowing from embarrassment. XXX The graduation exam went almost exactly the same as the anime. Although Shikamaru had been working with his friends to make them stronger, had pushed them to learn surface clinging and water walking well ahead of schedule, Naruto still had far too much chakra and far too little control to pull off a technique as delicate as the basic clone. Maybe one day when his growth curve settled down and if he practiced his control rigorously, he would be able to do it. But right now, hopeless. So, he failed the exam and was approached by Mizuki afterwards. Shikamaru could have suggested talking to the Hokage about his problem, and maybe the old man would have provided a solution, but that solution probably wouldn't be the shadow clone. The shadow clone was simply too valuable to miss out on. If Nar could be enlightened to its full potential from the start, then he could become a monstrously powerful shinobi in a much shorter time frame. So, he had let things develop naturally and hoped for the best. But he was worried. He had been paying attention and there had been a slight commotion, but since then all was silent. Had Naruto pulled it off or had reality ensued and gotten him caught by the Hokage? Shikamaru had been paying attention for years and never seen even a hint of any anime slapstick nonsense. So, it was rather doubtful that the technique would have worked. In the anime, Naruto had invincible plot armor by dint of being the protagonist. In this life, there was no assurance that he would survive against a Tunin, even one as weak as Mizuki probably was. Furthermore, because Nar had friends his own age, Oruka had kept a more professional distance from his student. He might not show up where he had to. Fortunately, he knew exactly where Naruto was. The blonde was always eager to share things with friends, including his secret spots. XXX yo. The laid-back greeting made Naruto jump in the air from sheer surprise. Shikamaru, he yelled, staring at his friend. Why are you here? The bigger question is, why are you here? The Naruto returned pointedly, much to the blonde's confusion. Huh, what do you mean? He asked with a frown. I'm taking the secret graduation exam. And I've passed it. I learned a technique from this scroll like Mizuki-sensei said. So now we can be ninja together. Naruto had been devastated when he failed the exam because of the stupid clone technique that he just couldn't do. The thought of his friends leaving him behind was more painful than anything. So when Mizuki came to him talking about a secret makeup exam, he jumped at the chance. But Shikamaru didn't look happy to hear that. In fact, he looked worried and started looking around as if expecting an attack. We have to get that scroll back to the Hokage Nar, he said. And even Naruto noticed the forced calm of his tone. Maybe you should give it to me instead. A third voice intruded. Both Nar and Shikamaru looked up and spotted Mizuki perched on a tree branch. If not for Shikamaru, Nar might have been happy to see his sensei and prove that he deserved to be a ninja. But his friend's weariness put him on edge as well. He knew that Shikamaru was way smarter than him and always seemed to just know things. If he was being guarded around Mizuki, then it was probably for a good reason. You know, this was a really bad plan, Shikamaru stated. Oh, Mizuki asked sarcastically. Always so smart, Yunara. Well, my plan can't have been that bad, seeing as it worked. Did it work or was it allowed to work? What are you guys talking about? Nar demanded, looking between his friend and teacher. He lied to you to get his hands on the forbidden scroll. Shikamaru explained. Nar didn't hesitate to believe his friend and stared at Mizuki with a betrayed look. Sensei, is that true? HMPH, you want the truth? Mizuki scoffed. How about the truth about yourself? About why everyone hates you now? Why do I have a feeling you're about to lie to us? Shikamaru asked in that manner where he wasn't really expecting an answer. Nar thought it was called rhetorical or something. Oh no, no lies this time. Mizuki chuckled menacingly. The truth is that the spirit of the nine-tailed fox that attacked our village and killed our Yandai Mihakage is inside you. You are the nine-tailed fox, Nar, and that's why everyone hates you. Naruto froze in shocked horror at what he was hearing and did what he usually did when he needed something to make sense. He turned to Shikamaru. XXX Shikamaru was glad that he had been paranoid enough about chaos butterflies to track Nar down, and he was even more glad that Mizuki didn't consider a couple of kids enough of a threat to take them seriously. The big reveal about Nar didn't shock him. Obviously, in fact, he was very pleased with it. Now, he didn't have to feign ignorance anymore. I see that makes sense, he said placidly, nodding. It explains Nar being born on the day of the attack and the whisker marks on his face. Mizuki was visibly irritated by his lack of reaction. That's it. That's all you have to say in response to learning that your friend is demon in disguise. Nar was also looking at him in trepidation, obviously afraid. We both know that part was a load of underscore, Shikamaru replied dryly and spoke to Nar without turning his eyes away from the traitor in the trees. Don't worry about it, Nar. I'll explain all the parts Mizuki left out once this is over. Nar relaxed and smiled brightly, then gave a firm nod. Right. First, we have to take down this lying traitor. You brought acting awfully confident. Mizuki said darkly, taking one of the giant shuriken from his back. Like I said, this was a bad plan. Shikamaru continued forcing a casual tone. Do you really think that Nar was able to get one over the Hokage and steal the scroll? But I did, Nar insisted. I flashed him with my technique and he went down like the pervert he is. Yeah, no. While he wouldn't call it useless, as that kind unexpected move might cause someone a momentary brain fart, anything more than that would definitely be slapstick nonsense. Naruto, the shonen protagonist, wasn't even able to eat inhuman amounts of food, so the technique was definitely not the ultimate anti-pervert attack. Or more likely, he was faking it to see what made you try to steal from him. Shikamaru countered dryly. This forest will probably be crawling with ambus soon, if it isn't already. Mizuki had a severely pissed off expression on his face now. He must have been banking on Naruto's closeness to the Hokage, allowing him to steal the scroll, but hearing that he had used the technique to defeat the old man had probably not inspired confidence. You damn BRZ, he growled threateningly. Even if you're right and the Andrew are on their way, I can least kill you and try to make a run for it. Oh well, that was unfortunate. XXXXXX. Mizuki was seething mad. He had always known that getting the Kob brat to steal the forbidden scroll was a long shot, but he was abandoning the village anyway, so he figured that he might as well try it. Either the blonde menace would get in trouble and Mizuki would be long gone, or he would actually succeed and Mizuki would escape with the scroll. He hadn't expected the Hokage to fake being defeated and let the scroll out of his sight. And it had to be the real one because there had been no time to prepare a fake for Naruto to grab, unless that was always a decoy. And the real forbidden scroll was in some hidden location known only to the Hokage Arg. I hate dealing with this, Mizuki had never been very good at complex multi-layered deception. He much preferred direct actions or simple tricks. For that very reason, the smart brat had to go first. He was by far the more dangerous of the two. With a mighty throw, his favorite giant shuriken was sent flying. XXX. The thing about huge weapons was that there was really no way to use them subtly. Even the man he had been in his past life who had the reflexes of a ham sandwich would probably have been able to see the attack coming. Whether he would have been able to dodge was another matter entirely, but he would have definitely seen it coming. In this life, he had been through the training expected of a fresh genin and done quite a bit more. Besides knowing that things were going to get very interesting in the near future, plus being able to manipulate shadows was just so darn cool. Unfortunately, a lot of the Nar shadow techniques required a shadow of one's own to use. Fortunately, as some chakra abilities were, they weren't magic. That meant that the rules weren't arbitrary. The sun or the full moon or some other potent light source was not necessarily required, just sufficient light contrast. In other words, it meant that as long as it wasn't absolutely pitch black, Shikamaru technically did have a shadow. Alas, he hadn't yet mastered the control to not connect his shadow to the darkness of the night, which left him with the problem that the more shadow he was trying to control, the higher the chakra cost became. Trying to control half a planet's worth of shadows would unsurprisingly require literally godlike levels of chakra. Not liking this rather severe handicap in a profession that was bound to have a lot of nighttime activity, Shikamaru had started thinking in a different direction into which he could take the Gnarl clan techniques. After all, even if said techniques weren't magic, they were still and regularly with the concepts of space, mass, energy, and probably some others. Shikamaru faded out of existence before the shuriken reached him, seemingly vanishing into thin air. What? Mizuki exclaimed in surprise. That wasn't substitution. Shikamaru poked his head out of the darkness covering the ground like the edgiest kappa to have ever lived and gave the traitorous academy instructor a mocking smirk. Hiding in shadow technique, he taunted because it was likely the only time he was going to have a chance to say the name of a technique in a fight. Apparently, ninja don't announce what they're doing as they do it. Who would have thought it? Shikamaru. That's so cool. Nar raved, seemingly forgetting the situation for a moment. Why didn't you tell me you could do that? Focus, Nar, he chided. Right. The Jingaree nodded, grinning widely and putting his fingers in the recognizable cross seal. I have my own cool shadow technique now. Shadow clone. Shikamaru wanted to slap himself. Of course, the bonehead would go announcing his new technique after seeing him do it. Nar was still entirely too fond of looking cool and would emulate anyone that he perceived as such. Oh, very nice, he complimented, not letting on to his real thoughts. Don't think that you're getting out of this alive just because you have a few fancy techniques. Mizuki spat, readying another giant shuriken. Fortunately, the still didn't consider them a real threat and was wasting time posturing to soothe his obvious inferiority complex. Shikamaru emerged from the shadow and readied himself. Oi, Nar, how about you take the direct assault role with your clones while I act in support? You got it. The blonde agreed and spammed out a few dozen more clones, this time fortunately not announcing the technique. Die, Mizuki snapped, tossing out a volley of kunai. The shadow clones charged forward with a united battle cry. Heedless of the casualties they were taking, they converged upon Mizuki and tried to pile up on him. But as Shikamaru had feared that Chunin was an actual person and not just a plot point to kick off Naruto's shonen power creep, Mizuki used his unwieldy giant shuriken as a melee weapon and easily cut through the wave of clones. Still, Nar wasn't deterred and continued spamming out more clones, keeping the man busy. Meanwhile, Shikamaru once again faded into the shadows and skulked around, seeking to get at the Chunin's back, only for Mizuki to prove once again that he wasn't just a throwaway entry-level villain. Taking a deep breath and forming a few hand seals, the silver-haired traitor blew out a stream of flame at where he guessed Shikamaru's position to be. Not a perfect guess, but close enough that the brightness of the fire dumped him out of his concealment. Need to work on that, Shikamaru groused to himself. Ideally, once his pioneered hiding in shadows technique was fully mastered, he would be able to move around in the darkness like a fish in water or maybe even teleport around in it, all the while fully suppressing his chakra signature. It was a work in progress. Nar, retreat deeper into the forest away from the fire. He called out, got it. The blonde obeyed, grimacing in discomfort or maybe even pain. That set off a few alarm bells for Shikamaru. The only thing that could be causing Naro pain and discomfort right now was the shadow clone spam. And if it was chakra exhaustion, then he would actually be looking exhausted. The memory transfer must be getting to him. Even if the brain filtered out most of a person's sensory perception is irrelevant. And even if most of the clone's memories right now were identical to Naruto's, there were limits to everything. Apparently, the shadow clone was going to be living up to its reputation as a forbidden technique. Fortunately, the fight was almost over. You brought aren't getting away. Mizuki snapped, jumping after them in pursuit. Shikamaru did an about-face and used the most basic of the Nar shadow techniques, the shadow imitation. Backlit by the fire he had started, Mizuki's shadow stretched very long, reaching all the way to Shikamaru, who as a result only had to do a minimal amount of work to connect his shadow to the Chunins. Mizuki froze in place and mirrored Shikamaru's stance against his will. What? Gotcha. Shikamaru smirked easily holding the Chunin. Haha. Yes, we beat him. Naruto celebrated that you did. A fourth voice spoke up and nearly startled Shikamaru out of his technique. He had been completely oblivious to the presence of the old man, even though he was in spitting distance. Hokage, Gigi, Naruto cheered, apparently ignoring surprise and going for excitement. Did you see us kick his? Huh. That's got to be good enough to make me a ninja, right? Saratobi chuckled and walked up to the frozen Mizuki, knocking him out with some kind of Vulcan nerve pinch. It was a good performance. I was especially impressed by your teamwork and with your mastery of such an advanced clone technique. I think we can safely say that you pass muster. While Naruto shouted his joy, Shikamaru could only give the Hokage a deadpan stare. As if there had ever been the slightest chance that the village Jingariki could be anything but a ninja. XXX Serbi Hiruzen was glad that his gamble had paid off. A traitor was captured and a convenient reason for Naruto being made a genin was secured. The forbidden scroll had never actually left his sight as he had stealthily followed behind Naruto the whole time. He had almost stepped into the open when the boy started reading up on the shadow clone, but decided to allow it in the end. If there was anyone suited for that particular technique, it was the blonde Jingari with his huge chakra capacity and Uzumaki vitality. He would have to be warned about the dangers, of course, but it should be fine. Nar Shikamaru's appearance had been a pleasant surprise. He was another person of great interest to the village and someone that Hiruzen had had under observation ever since the mystery of his existence had come to light. Mysteries tended to be dangerous in the shinobi world. Frankly, the boy didn't act like a child and never had. It showed in the way he simply knew things that no child should know. In the articulation of his speech, the way he never cried. In the development of his chakra, in the way he never got upset over slights that to children would seem important, in the way that he was focused even as a toddler. Most particularly, he had exhibited control over his chakra at far too early an age. The Anbuan watch had sensed him doing it one day back when he was still a toddler, and there was no telling when he had first started. It was too extreme even for a clan that regularly produced highly intelligent shinobi. Prodigious talent was one thing, but this was something altogether different. There were elements in the village that wanted to extract all of Shikamaru's secrets directly, but the Nar, Yamanaka, and Akamaiki clans would have raised hell over any such attempts. Hiruzen wanted to figure out the mystery as well. But he was patient. Nothing he had seen so far indicated that Shikamaru was a danger to the village, so he could afford to take his time. Paranoia might be something of a job requirement for shinobi, but being too ham-fisted could backfire just as badly as a lack of caution. I must say that I didn't expect to see you here, Shikamaru. Hai said after Naruto's impromptu celebration about successfully becoming a genin was done. What made you seek out Nar on this fine night? I didn't trust Mizuki was the answer. Simple, honest, and completely unhelpful. Hai hummed and left that alone for now. You promised Naruto that you would explain the Kobe to him, and far be it from me to prevent someone from keeping their word. The complete lack of surprise when Mizuki had revealed the secret earlier was telling. While it was not out of the realm of possibility for an intelligent boy of his age to put things together, something about his manner made the old Hokage think that Shikamaru had been expecting Mizuki to say exactly what he said. The glance given to him by the Nar in response made it clear that the boy knew what game they were playing. All right, Nar, listen up. This is important, he said, and the blonde immediately began paying attention. Hai was impressed, knowing what he did about Naruto's attention span. The Yandaime sealed the Kobe inside you to protect the village. I don't know exactly what happened that night, but I do know that he trusted you with a big responsibility. While Nar swelled with pride at the wording, he also looked confused. What do you mean you don't know what happened? The fox attacked us, didn't it? Yeah, but I don't know why. I don't understand why a giant chakra beast would randomly decide one day that it absolutely has to stomp Konoha into the ground. Wise of the young Nara to question things, although the Kobe's rampage can easily be explained by a desire for revenge after spending decades sealed away, something that Shikamaru wouldn't know. Or would he? Hai wondered suspiciously, not letting his thoughts show on his face. And since the only one that could tell us is the fox, we might never know. Shikamaru finished. That sounded like a hint. Oh, so the civilians hate me because of the fox? Naruto asked, frowning. They hate you because they're afraid and don't know how seals work. Shikamaru corrected. But don't mind them. They'll come around once you become a big shot ninja. Again, deflecting blame from the Kobe. How curious. Yeah, believe it. The blonde sheared. Hai hummed approvingly. He had learned quite a few things today, and it gladdened his heart to see Nar interacting with his friends. Part of that was because he had come to view the excitable blonde as a sort of surrogate grandson, and part of it was because it eased his worries in regards to Naruto's status as Konoha's Jinchuriki. Having a Jinchuriki go road was no laughing matter. So, it was important for Naruto to make ties to the village. It was one of the reasons why he had absolutely refused all suggestions to put Naruto through a special training regimen that would instill loyalty to Konoha in him. Such things either worked or they backfired horrendously, and that was not a risk that could be taken with a Jinchuriki. No matter how confident Danzo was in his methods, and that decision had paid off, Naruto had made friends in the academy and was well on track to becoming a splendid Konohasha shinobi. XXX. One of the big clues that Shikamaru had that this new life of his wasn't going to follow anime rules was the tree walking technique. In the anime, it allowed people to stand sideways on walls with no problem as long as the ninja doing it channeled the proper amount of chakra to their feet. Here, not only was the technique a bit more complicated than that, but gravity also didn't take a vacation just because it would interfere with the rule of cool. Your feet may stick to the wall if you did the technique properly, but your body was still being pulled down to terrema. For that reason, Shikamaru was not inclined to just assume that anything was going to be easy and convenient. Case in point, the shadow clone. It was not by any means a combat technique. It could work as one in a pinch, but its primary uses lay elsewhere. What do you mean I can't use it in a fight? Nar complained as they WKED back home. The Hokage told you, didn't he? Shikamaru asked pointedly. It's a special clone technique created by the Nadaime that transmits the memory of the clones back to you once they pop. Do you have any idea what it would do to your brain if you kept spamming clones in a fight? And Serbi had warned Nar about the technique, which was another thing that diverged from the anime. Mentor figures in anime were notorious for leaving out vital information so that it could be revealed later at some sufficiently dramatic moment. No, of course you don't. Trust me, you don't want it happening. I'm sure the fight against Mizuki gave you a little preview, didn't it? Yeah, it felt like my head was going to explode after a while. The blonde admitted, there you go. And that's not even mentioning how wasteful it is with your chakra. No matter how much of it you have, just throwing it away like that is a bad idea. Shikamaru finished. But then what good is it if I can't use it in a fight? Nar-sul, I thought I finally had a cool technique. It is a cool technique. Shikamaru asserted firmly. Think about it. You'll remember everything that the clones did once they pop. You could use them for safely scouting dangerous territory or as a sort of message system. You could even use them to master techniques and practice chakra control while you worked on your body. I can have my clones do all my chakra control training. Nar squawked with suddenly sparkling eyes. Shadow clones are awesome. Shikamaru rolled his eyes with a smile. Nar always did hate doing chakra control exercises. Just make sure you don't make too many clones and definitely don't have them doing too many different things, he warned, pausing. And don't pop them all at the same time either. Yeah, Jiggy already told me about that. Now it was Nar rolling his eyes. I'm serious. Shikamaru stared at the blonde. If you turn yourself into a drooling vegetable, I'm probably going to end up being the one that has to take care of you, and that would be all sorts of troublesome. It definitely wouldn't be him that got custody of Naruto's body. Hey, he complained. Get some sleep, Shikamaru advised, ignoring the complaint. You don't want to sleep through team assignments tomorrow. XXX team assignment went as expected. Despite Shikamaru doing what he could to make his class stronger, there were still some fairly clear roles between them, and the Ino Shika Cho formation was a well-established tradition. So, it was that Shikamaru found himself facing Sarutobi Asuma alongside Ino and Choji. The man was competent, laid back, and much less of an underscore than Kakashi, which was all to the good. Hopefully, it wouldn't be too hard to motivate him to train them properly. There was only so much training he could do in a range on his own, and Shikamaru would rather not die just yet. You would think that dying once would have relieved him of any fear of death. But the Optimus Prime impersonator scared him with the implications. If there was such a thing as a karmic balance, then it stood to reason that getting a bad one can have dire consequences. His first life had been the textbook definition of boring, and it had gotten him put into a world with superpowered ninjas. Maybe, just maybe, putting in some effort to improve his karmic balance was warranted, which required staying alive. Of course, there was also the chance that the Optimus Prime impersonator was full of underscore, and had just been trolling him the whole time. A possibility that was supported by the fact that he had been allowed to keep his memories of his past life. If that was the case, then he was special. And being special to godlike beings was historically not a good thing to be. Like hell was he getting himself into a Tanya von Derek type of situation. Even if the god thing that did this to him was an underscore, it just wasn't worth it to rail against the circumstances. Best to just play along with it until an opportunity to get out of it presented itself if it presented itself. Alright, here's what we'll be doing. Asuma began after they all introduced themselves, puffing on a cigarette. I need to get a feel for your skills, so your job will be to try capturing or incapacitating me. How straightforward. He didn't even threaten to send them back to the academy. The three of them exchanged nods and then charged at their prospective sensei together. For the moment, they stuck to taijutsu only, using the same tactic as was their overall combat doctrine. Shoji attacking directly while Shikamaru and Ino acted as both support and waited for an opening to land a decisive blow. Not bad. Not bad at all. Asuma complimented as he easily weaved in between their attacks. You already work well together, but that's to be expected of the Enika-cho formation, even at this age. I don't want to hear that while being handled with kid gloves. Ino snapped huffily. Hey, the blonde had always been the most choleric of the three of them. Shikamaru tried to use the small distraction to snatch the Junin's shadow, but Asuma saw through the trick and kicked all three of them away. You'll have to be a bit sneakier than that, Asuma said in amusement, exhaling a large plume of smoke. You don't say, Shikamaru replied sarcastically, rubbing his chest. Chakra reinforcement made sure that nothing was broken, but that still stung. You've been waiting for me to try something the whole time, haven't you? Oh, noticed that, did you? Asuma raised an eyebrow. Yes, he had noticed that the Junin was being extra cautious when engaging him. Come on, boys. It's time to get serious, Ino declared with what was probably unwarranted confidence. We're taking this chain smoker down. Hey, I'm not a chain smoker, Asuma protested, then put that cigarette away and fight as seriously. She challenged. Shikamaru knew that Ino was stalling, giving him time to think of a plan, and dearly wished that he hadn't gained a reputation for intelligence. While the gray matter of Narushikamaru was definitely superior to his old body, and there was no telling what all those years of using chakra reinforcement on his brain had done, he strongly doubted that he was the same kind of genius as the original. Having everyone around you expecting you to be smart was a lot of pressure. Still, he jerked his head towards the copse of trees to their right, getting a knowing nod from Shoji. Fighting a superior opponent head-on was a bad idea. But they might be able to pull off a sneaky trick in between the trees, even if logically speaking, their sensei would be even more accustomed to that kind of battlefield. XXX Asuma decided to go along with their obvious plan of herding him into the trees, curious to see what they would do. When the kunai and shuriken came flying, he deliberately dodged in that direction. To be fair, it was the easiest way of avoiding the hail of deadly projectiles. It just wasn't the optimal choice if this were a real fight. He had honestly already decided to pass them. They were stronger than a fresh academy graduate was expected to be, and they could already work well together. Everything else could be trained, but if they were too lazy to put in the work, or if they failed to absorb Konoha's values, then it was best to cut them loose. All right, you got me in here. Asuma grinned slightly. Now what? Same as before, we try to catch you, Shikamaru replied with a shrug, already bringing his hands into a seal. I don't suppose you'd be willing to just stand there and let yourself be caught. Asuma snorted in amusement at the polite request. Nice try, kid, but no, you'll have to work for it. Then here I go, Choji declared, suddenly inflating into a giant ball and rolling towards him. At the same time, Shikamaru's shadow lengthened and started chasing after him. Asuma had seen this technique before and wasn't surprised, dodging aside easily. Too obvious. But to his surprise, the Akamaiki's straightforward attack was a bit less straightforward than it appeared, as Choji began pinballing from one tree to another. Well, that was certainly interesting. A bit situational, but interesting nonetheless that Choji could actually keep track of where the trees were in his current state spoke of some pretty extensive training. Assume kept an eye on the other two as he dodged out of the way of the bouncing meatball boy. Shikamaru had abandoned his shadow techniques for now and was moving around the makeshift arena and along with Ino, occasionally tossing shuriken or kana his way in an attempt to divide his focus. But there had to be more to this. He got his answer when Ino made obvious use of her clan's mental techniques and Choji suddenly stopped bouncing from tree to tree in a predictable pattern, instead going right for him. Telepathy, Asuma wondered that was a thing that the Yamanaka were capable of doing, but usually not so early in their training. Regardless of his surprise, he still easily dodged and expected Choji to go rolling deeper into the trees, but instead saw him strain against a taut barrier of ninja wire that had been strung between the trees. Clever BRZ, they're trying to hem me in and limit my mobility. Asuma smirked, already feeling proud, which means that Shikamaru should be going after me with his shadow again right about now. As predicted, the Nar did indeed come to a halt and start using his shadow to chase after him, making it even more difficult to evade Choji. All right, enough. Asuma called, doing one last dodge before pulling out a fresh cigarette and lighting it with a minor fire technique. You all pass. Yes. Ino cheered while Choji crashed to a stop and got his bearings back. We kicked our sensei. Don't get ahead of yourself. Asuma scolded, feeling a need to burst the girl's bubble. This plan you had wasn't bad, but it relied too much on me sticking in one area. If I was a real enemy, I would have kept moving, even if you'd forced me into the trees. It's a work in progress. Shikamaru shrugged. That's why we need a sensei, right? At least he was self-aware. That was a lot better than little BRZ that thought they were invincible just because they made genin, right? XXX. A short while later, the genin of the newly formed Team 10 met up with their former classmates that were now part of Team 8 to celebrate their success in fully becoming Konohashi. But something was still missing. Where the hell are Naruto, Sakura, and the moody bastard? Ka asked irritably. Shikamaru supposed that he should have seen this coming. Not Team 7 being late that much he had seen coming, but Ka's dislike of Sasaki. With him subtly working to create stronger relationships between the notables of his class, it would figure that Sasuke's obstinate determination reject social ties would rub the Inuzuka the wrong way. Dog people so troublesome. Do we know anything about their sensei? He asked, fishing to see how well-known Kakashi was. Everyone frowned in thought and eventually shook their heads. Disappointing, but not really surprising. You'd think that with Kakashi effectively being borderline legendary, some kind of rumors about him would spread. To be fair, they probably did, but only among the actual ninja. Nobody told civilians anything, and they certainly didn't tell kids anything. Not many ninja got reputations big enough to bleed over into the civilian population. Maybe if we go back to the academy, Akamaru would be able to pick up their scent. Hinata shyly suggested. At least the project of building up some confidence for Hinata had worked out as planned, and all he needed to do was offhandedly mention to Ino how sad the girl seemed. For all her sometimes headstrong behavior, the blonde always tried to help the people she was close to. If not for her clan obligations, Hinata would have been right there at the Hokage monument with Sakura and Ino the other day, tutting disapprovingly. That's a great idea, Hinata. Ino praised, turning to the Inuzuka with a smirk. Well, you think Akamaru can do it? Of course, he can do it. Ha asserted indignantly. Akamaru barking in agreement. Just watch. We'll have them tracked down in no time. Shikamaru could only shake his head at how easily manipulated the guy was. As it turned out, there was no need to do any tracking down. Nar, Sasaki, and Sakura were coming out of the academy just as they arrived. Why are you guys still here? Ka asked, possibly frustrated at not getting a chance to show off his ninja dog's amazing tracking abilities. Because our sensei was late, Sakura answered, even more frustrated. He kept us waiting for hours just so that we could introduce ourselves and get told that we're being tested tomorrow morning. Yes, we already got tested by our sensei. Ino shook her head in sympathy, but perked up immediately. But I'm sure you'll pass. So let's go celebrate. Oi, you coming, Sasaki? Shikamaru called out despite knowing the answer. The Uchiha had started walking back home. No, was the predictable grunted reply. That guy, Shikamaru could only sigh. At this rate, there would be no avoiding all the unnecessary drama. Shikamaru woke up at around 5 a.m. As usual these days, being deprived of a computer could drive a man to all sorts of heresy, such as a consistent sleep schedule and an active lifestyle. It was almost like being a kid again back when the real world was the most interesting thing around. Well, he was a kid again, so that fit pretty well. After contorting himself in ways that would make his old body beg for mercy simply for the pleasure of it, the lack of various accumulated aches and pains had never gotten old. He heaved himself out of bed and did a few more stretches to get the blood flowing. Then he quickly got through his morning ablutions in his personal bathroom and ambled outside to get in some training. His fellow Nar thought him an unnatural abomination for getting up this early when he didn't have to, but he just couldn't stay in bed any longer. Not after going to sleep at around 8 p.m. He had known that going through puberty again would be a pain in the butt. He had been thinking of rampant hormones, pimples, and a cracky voice and completely forgot about the constant desire for more sleep and food. It took him 9 hours of sack time to feel properly rested. He used to be wide awake after 6 or 7. Granted, he could have gone to bed later instead of waking up so early, but he was more of a morning person than a night owl, and there was nothing to actually do that would keep him up. The elemental nations had a severe dearth of frivolous distractions. Civilian children his age would be taught their parents' trades, and he was already considered an adult as of yesterday. So, technically, he was being a responsible adult, which was funny because he still hadn't felt like a proper adult in his past life until the day he died. Maybe there was something to the old belief that a man wasn't a man until he killed something and a girl. He never did get around to the killing part the first time around, thanks to all that pesky civilization and its rules. But this was no time to be musing on the deleterious effects a lack of male rite of passage into adulthood might have. It was time to train his edgelord powers. The Nar shadow techniques were definitely among the more esoteric shinobi abilities. The most basic technique, the shadow imitation, connected the chakra systems of the user and the target by using their linked shadows as a bridge. Shikamaru had not been happy with this technique, deeming it to have too many downsides. The stronger the chakra of the target or targets was, the more chakra it would take to hold them in place, to say nothing of how it limited his own mobility. It wasn't useless, but it was vastly inferior to the more advanced techniques that gave the shadows some kind of physical substance. Unfortunately, he had been denied access to those techniques thus far. Apparently, the clan didn't allow just anyone, even the heir apparent, access to those if they weren't shinobi. Something about it being irresponsible and dangerous. Hopefully, the elders would stop being such stiffs about it now that he'd graduated. That was part of the reason that he'd pioneered the hiding in shadows technique in the first place, a desire to practice something other than the shadow imitation. Taking a deep breath out of sheer habit, Shikamaru molded his chakra into yin release and connected it to his shadow, making it deep instead of trying to stretch it out. With the abundant pre-dawn darkness, it was easily done, and he slipped inside. Seeing out his shadow pockets was always a bit weird, almost like watching a TV screen. Moving around was even weirder in the sense that there was technically no solid footing and he had to swim through the darkness. He spent the time he had until dawn improving his speed and chakra efficiency, and when the first rays of sunlight started burning away his territory, trying to jump between them without leaving his shadow space. No dice though, shadow teleportation just didn't seem to be possible with this technique. He'd figure something out eventually because teleportation was too overpowered to not have. But now that he had some proper light contrast, Shikamaru kicked a tree and started chasing the shadows of the fallen leaves, working to improve his speed and precision with the more traditional Nar techniques. XXX breakfast, the most important meal of the day, also a time of long-settled awkwardness between mother and son. Shikamaru didn't mean to cause his mother in this world distress, but it was kind of unavoidable when he couldn't properly bond with her the way a normal child would. He had tried to act his physical age at first, but the effort of doing so had exhausted him inside of a day. After that, he had just resigned himself to being a very unusual child. He had no doubt that Yoshino felt like she'd been cheated out of a proper motherhood experience. Children were supposed to be cute, not whatever he was. "When are you meeting your team?" she asked. "In about an hour," he answered. Asuma-sensei said he'll be taking us on our first mission. More like their first chore, but Shikamaru would take it gladly. In fact, he would much prefer to keep doing D ranks until he retired. The S-rank shinobi Nar Shikamaru, who leaves no grass uncut, no dog unwalked, and no cat unfound. All shall know him and despair. Tutorial mode for the win. Alas, that the world wasn't going to consult him as to when he was comfortable leaving the tutorial or allow him to set the difficulty. Why couldn't I have gotten ISID into a gamer world? The rules are so much easier to abuse when you know what they are. That's nice, Yoshino said, interrupting his lamentations. She gave him a smile that came across as a combination of sad, hopeful, and supportive. Yeah, awkward. If he recalled correctly, this woman was supposed to be forceful, overbearing, and sometimes downright tyrannical. But that had been when she had a passive and lazy husband to deal with. As a single mother taking care of a decidedly abnormal kid, she seemed almost desperate to appear approachable. But Shikamaru just had no way to really close the distance between them. He didn't dare tell her why he was so weird, and he didn't have the usual emotional needs that a child would have, nor could he fake them. XXX. Potatoes, a staple food of Western civilization, originating from either South or North America, probably South. Corn had come from the North, right? Not that they were mutually exclusive, but he was pretty sure potatoes were from the South. Where the elemental nations got them was anyone's guess. His questions on the subject only got him confused. Shrugs. For all he knew, Kaya had one day decided to yunk a barrel of seeds from another dimension on a random whim. Whatever the case, they were here now, pulling potatoes out of the ground. Shikamaru, came his sensei's bellow, stopped daydreaming, and get back to work. Lazy bastard was chilling on the side with the elderly farmer that had issued the dank. Both of them smoking while the three genin worked. Sorry, sensei. I was just contemplating the origin of potatoes. Shikamaru said honestly. They come from potato seeds. Ino said snidely, clearly irritated. The blonde was not at all happy to be doing this. Not because she thought she was too pretty to work in the dirt. Ino actually loved gardening, but because she'd been all hyped up for a real mission. Still, that kind of sass couldn't go unanswered, so Shikamaru reached out and pinched her. Shikamaru, Ino yelled, blushing furiously and staring at him in shock. Shikamaru just grinned. His mental age made pinching a 12-year-old girl's a hilarious private joke. What? He challenged his teammate, knowing that she wasn't really upset. Just stop screwing around and get back to work. Ino snapped to cover her embarrassment and turned her back on him. Being a full-G grown man in the body of a small child had been incredibly tedious, but they were finally at the fun parts. Like just about anyone else, he had sometimes daydreamed what it would be like if he got to relive his younger years with a more mature mindset. Children just had so many to give that they cared about what everyone thought. It was a rather stressful existence. He never would have had the balls to pinch a girl's the first time around. For example, especially a girl like Ino, who would no doubt have been the most popular girl around. This time around, he was blessedly liberated of any unspoken social conventions. Too bad about that mature mindset thing, though. Behold the field where I grow mine. Lay thine eyes upon it. Thou shalt see that it grows only potatoes. I think I like potatoes better when I'm eating them. Shoji huffed. As do we all, buddy. As do we all. Shikamaru commiserated. At least Ino looks cute with that dirt smudge on her nose. What? The blonde girl stammered, instinctively covering her nose. Shish Shikamaru. It was like going back to the noob area with a level 50 character. Ino was a very confident 12-year-old girl, but she was still 12. If he had been standoffish and unresponsive, she would have felt safe being aggressively pushy with her interest. But because he was receptive and flirty, she got flustered and defensive. Girls, such contradictory creatures. XXX. It was well after noon by the time their mission was done, and all three of them were getting hungry again. To celebrate our first completed mission together, how about I take you to Yakiniku? My treat, Asuma suggested. We accept, Shoji immediately exclaimed. Far more energetic than usual. You have awoken the beast. Shikamaru intoned. Choji. Don't just accept for all of us because you want to stuff your face on someone else's money. Ino yelled. Honestly, the girl got far too wound up over other people's personal habits and quirks. It's fine, Shikamaru said and put his hand on the small of her back. Ino immediately snapped out of her irritation and stared at him shyly. Okay. Watching from the sidelines, Asuma grinned in amusement at seeing how the Nar kid was handling the loud blonde girl. He'd have to make sure that this budding romance didn't interfere with their duties, but otherwise, he was already looking forward to the fun he'd have teasing them. They made it to the restaurant without issue and took a table. Shikamaru and Ino took one side while Asuma and Choji took the other. The chubby boy started acting more hyper than Naruto in anticipation of food, but the Junin sensei just smirked at the other two members of his team. So the bearded man drawled, staring at Shikamaru. You and Ino, mind your own business, sensei. An embarrassed Ino roared. Shikamaru put a hand on her thigh under the table withholding a grin at the way she jerked in place and froze. Why so interested, sensei? He asked calmly, not particularly embarrassed. His one and only girlfriend in his past life had been a classmate when they got together, and the teasing back then had been much worse. Looking for tips for your own love life. What's her name? The Junin looked just a bit startled at the lack of reaction and the retaliation, but still gave a dry retort of his own. I think I'll manage just fine on my own. Oh, so there is someone. Shikamaru pressed the attack, knowing that it would trigger Ino's gossip queen senses. Who is she? The blonde demanded eagerly, although her face was still red. Shikamaru had never stopped rubbing her thigh. Never you mind. Asuma wondered how it was that he found himself on the defensive. Weren't 12-year-olds supposed to be awkward? Come on now, don't be shy, sensei. Shikamaru was the one smirking now. We could go on a double date. Date. Ino stuttered, staring at him wide-eyed. He hummed and sighed yed there sensei. Unless Asuma sensei is ashamed of this girl of his. Of course I'm not ashamed of her, the Junin said indignantly. It's just that we're not quite dating yet. Just walk up to her and ask, Shikamaru advised, deliberately sliding his hand a little bit further up Ino's thigh. Women like men with confidence. Easy for me to say. I've got a few extra decades of life experience to draw on and my target is an inexperienced 12-year-old. He privately acknowledged. Good thing he was the same physical age or this would definitely be straying into the realms of pedophilia. Loopholes. Aoi. Why? Ino corroborated, blush deepening. I'll keep that in mind. Asuma said dryly. Obviously not taking a pair of 12-year-olds seriously. Now, how about you two cool it a little with the flirting? This is a public space. Of course, Shikamaru acknowledged and removed his hand from his teammate's thigh. Sorry if I've made you uncomfortable, Ino. It's okay, the blonde said, regaining some of her confidence and relaxing now that he wasn't feeling her up. The waitress arrived, greeting Asuma with familiarity. Asuma, welcome back. Is this the team you mentioned you would be getting? That's right, their sensei confirmed. Kids, this is so. SEU, these are Narushikamaru, Yamanaka Ino, and Akamaiki Choji. A few pleasantries were exchanged, and then she asked what they wanted to order. Meat, Choji declared enthusiastically. Clearly, it had been on his mind the whole time, to the point where it was in question whether he paid any attention at all to the previous conversation. What are you, Monkey D, Luffy? Shikamaru thought abusedly as the order was made a bit more specific. All right, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, so said with a flirty wink and sashayed away, deliberately swaying her hips. Ino didn't miss the waitress. Obvious interest and zeroed in on it like a guided ballistic missile. Is she your secret crush? Sensei. What? No. SEU is just being friendly. Asuma waved off. But Shikamaru knew better and he knew that Asuma knew. SEU was definitely angling for something and he could guess what it was. There were an awful lot of women whose mysteriously vague husbands had supposedly died in the line of duty in the Nar clan, and he would bet that most other clans had the same situation. If he was his actual age, he wouldn't have thought anything of it. Being a shinobi was a dangerous profession after all, but he was too cynical to fall for that one. A good chunk of those women were probably one-night stands that got pregnant. Ninja were still human and still liked, too. After all, if the shinobi clans were regular noble families, bastard children would be a problem because they would complicate the lines of succession. But ninja were a practical sort. They couldn't let bloodlines get out of their control, and killing them would be stupidly wasteful. So, the obvious thing to do was quietly induct those one-night stands into the clan and claim that the children belonged to some random male clan member who didn't actually exist. But there was only so well that something like that could be hidden, and it had obviously become something of an open secret. Hence, this waitress flirting with their sensei. No doubt she would prefer if he actually got interested in her. But Shikamaru thought that she would accept getting knocked up and living life on easy street as a Serbi clan widow just as well. Almost all the wealth in the village was owned by the ninja clans, and every clan used to be its own village with its own infrastructure. They might all be part of the entity that was Konoha in regards to outside threats, but internally they were as fractured as it gets. Some people in the clans, notably the non-combatants, had never even left the compounds. It could even be said that the non-clan civilians and ninja acted as a buffer zone between the clans as the clans were acutely sensitive about their territory. The Nara had trained freaking deer to sense chakra and attack anyone that didn't have or wasn't with someone who had the distinctive Nar chakra signature for sake. Just thinking of how much effort that took for the clan of notoriously lazy bastards told you all you needed to know about the matter. Shikamaru had as of yet not been able to confirm this, but he was pretty sure that the non-clan women of the village frequently tried to baby trap any male ninja from the clans. It made him wonder if Asuma was really Konohimara's uncle, seeing as the kid's parents were never mentioned in the anime. Hey, sensei, how old are you? Shikamaru asked. 27. Why? Asuma asked, curious about the out-of-the-blue question. How old was Konohamaru at this point again? 8 and something in that ballpark. Either way, Asuma would have been exactly the right age for a youthful indiscretion that he didn't want to take responsibility for. And with his father being Hokage, sweeping it under the rug would have been the easiest thing in the world. Just curious, Shikamaru shrugged. XXX. I can't believe Choji ate 3 whole portions. Ino complained with a sort of disbelieving exasperation. A story of true love between a man and his food, Shikamaru said sagely. Well, his true love put him out of commission for the rest of the day. The blonde scoffed. Indeed, Shoji had stuffed his face with so much barbecue that they had needed to half carry him home, moaning and groaning in pain the whole way. She also cost Asuma-sensei a lot of money. He hummed, truly, Barbec-chan is a woman with no morals. That surprised a giggle out of her. Don't let Choji hear you say that or he'll challenge you to a duel to defend his lady's honor. He might actually do that, Shikamaru agreed, knowing how seriously the Akamaiki take their food. Would you defend my honor? Ino asked Shili. You're a kunoichi now. Ino, you're not supposed to have honor. He retorted dryly, evading the question. You know what I mean. She huffed, slapping his arm. I don't think it's my place to defend your honor. He hummed thoughtfully. I mean, it's not like we're in a relationship or anything. Ino's face suddenly acquired an angry red coloration. Then what was that back in the restaurant? You're pretty cute when you're angry. You know that. Shikamaru smirked. Ino instantly lost steam and sputtered. Ah, the joys of being a new game plus character with hidden knowledge, charisma, and wisdom modifiers. Anyway, that in the restaurant was me returning your obvious interest. He continued, flustering her yet again by calling out her crush so blatantly. So, you want to go on a date with me? Yes. Ino squirmed, apparently trapped somewhere between awkward and pleased. But this wasn't romantic at all. Damn right it wasn't. Shikamaru had brought a lot of advantages with him from his previous life, but an affinity for sappy romance was not one of them. He knew that Ino was big on flowers and their meanings. So maybe he could do something with that, but he really didn't want her to start expecting grand romantic gestures at every step. So it was best to keep it low-key. Cool. Come on. Let's go see if Team 7 is already done with their exam. I want to either congratulate Naruto for passing or mock him for failing. Because that's what friends do. Are you ignoring what I said? Ino asked demanded, trailing after him. He pretended not to hear and kept walking. Shikamaru had romance really been a good idea. With a new chance at life and a renewed burst of puberty, it had certainly seemed that way. But did he really want to deal with Ino's juvenile craving for teenage drama? Shikamaru it should be fine. Their profession didn't really allow for long-term brattiness, and he liked to think himself pretty patient. XXX. Their first C rank arrived faster than expected. It was barely 2 weeks since graduation. Perhaps he should have expected it given that D ranks were mostly meant as a way for newly formed teams to get used to working together and they had that covered already. Still, Shikamaru was nervous. Noticeably so, being vigilant is good, but there's no need to be that tense. Asuma said amusedly, you're acting like you're expecting us to get jumped at any moment. I suppose it is unlikely, he conceded. The odds of a fresh genin team getting into a fight with RS-ranked ninja was very low, as long as you weren't a shonen protagonist. Perhaps basing his expectations on what was likely to happen to Naruto was a bit unrealistic. Honestly, I'm surprised. The Junin continued conversationally. Out of the 3 of you, I figured you would be the most relaxed. Shikamaru takes being a ninja very seriously. Ino said proudly. If you can call being bored and not wanting to die yet, taking things seriously. Shikamaru thought to himself, holding back a snort. He trained a lot because chakra superpowers were cool and there was literally nothing else to do that interested him. Then there was that whole karmic balance thing. Granted, the God thing might have been full of and there was no such thing. In fact, the odds were fairly high, seeing as it took the form of Optimus Prime and then blathered on about a Hindu-Buddhist religious concept. But the bottom line was that some irresponsibly powerful was playing silly buggers with his existence and might be tempted to do worse next time if he lived another unimpressive and inoffensive life. Coincidentally, that was another factor in his paranoia about how this mission might go. Good to hear, but there shouldn't be any trouble on this one. Asuma chuckled, lighting up a cigarette. Just a simple escort mission. XXX. Welcome to my home, Shinobi-san. The client greeted them, smiling tightly in a way that felt condescendingly superior, but in a more general sense than towards them in particular. Shikamaru had never met an aristocrat before and was already wishing that the trend could have continued. This guy was annoying to be around, even when he was just being himself. An honor to be here, Hanamura Adano. Asuma returned the greeting neutrally, probably not meaning a word of it. Yes. The nobleman nodded as if to say that of course it was an honor to be in his presence. Now that you are here, we can get underway and escort my Euro-chan to her new home. Shikamaru eyeballed the girl in question. She looked to be around 17 or 18 with the traditional Japanese dark hair and dark eyes. She was also sitting in traditional Caesar, just behind and to the side of her father. But the dull, downcast look on her pretty face was pretty much screaming how much she hated what was going on. The father also seemed to be in something of a hurry, not even affording them a chance to rest or offering them something to eat or drink. Either he was one of those shinobi or just tools people, or he was worried about something. Are we expecting any trouble? Asuma asked shrewdly. Perhaps, the client said vaguely, frowning. One of my guards turned out to be a scoundrel and attempted to make off with Euro along with several of his cohorts. They were driven off, but may try again while we are on the road. Given the look on the girl's face, Shikamaru got the distinct impression that this attempted kidnapping would be better described as a rescue mission from her perspective. Did I just get cast as a mid-level villain in some feel-good Disney about true love? My students will be able to handle that easily and I'll be here in case they manage to bring in any extra help. Asuma said confidently like the Disney villain's main enforcer that he was as expected of Konoha Shinobi. The shitty Disney parent smiled in satisfaction giving the three genin a quick once-over. Kunoichi-san may ride in the carriage with my daughter. I will protect your daughter with my life. Hanamuro no Ino said politely and confidently. But Shikamaru could see the uncertainty in her. She had noticed that something was off as well. See that you do, Hanamura said, a clear tone of dismissal in his voice. Let us be off. The sooner we deliver my daughter to the daimyo, the better. Ah, the daimyo who was married. There was realistically only one thing that the married ruler of the Land of Fire could want a pretty young girl for. Shikamaru took a deep breath and just sighed. Troublesome. This world was really bringing him in touch with the traditions of his new family. XXX, I don't like this, Shikamaru, Shoji said with an uncharacteristic frown on his face. They had been walking for hours already and should be keeping an eye out for possible hostiles. But the chubby boy clearly felt a need to talk about the mission. Neither do I, Shikamaru shrugged. But a mission is a mission. The Akamaiki boy frowned deepened further. I thought we'd be saving princesses, he muttered. Shikamaru sighed. Yeah, all the indoctrination propaganda in the academy had been about protecting people against evil, enemy ninja, and daring espionage missions to get vital intelligence that would save the day. Even assassinations had been framed as killing off the bad guys. We might be saving her from herself, he said with another shrug. Huh. Shoji blinked at him maliciously. She's lived a very sheltered life. Shikamaru pointed out. Running away with a handsome guard to escape life as a concubine might sound romantic, but what happens after that? How will the guard, now a criminal, support her? Are they going to live as bandits in the woods? She'd probably regret running off with him the first time she had to take a bath in a cold stream or in a bush. The chubby boy had obviously not thought about it from that angle, and the doubt on his face cleared up. That's a good point. You're really smart, Shikamaru. They split back up and returned to their vigilant watch of the surroundings. Of course, it could also be that she carefully considered the situation and decided that giving up her privileged life would be a worthy sacrifice. Shikamaru mused privately, not knowing anything about their charge or her level of intelligence. It was impossible to say. He was really hoping that she was just a spoiled brat with her head full of romantic nonsense. A vapid girl like that could hardly hope for better than a life of luxury with her only responsibility being to occasionally milk the dude's yogurt dispenser. He'd probably get bored of her in a month or two. Anyway, about an hour after that conversation, it was Ino stomping up to him. The client had insisted on stopping for lunch, which meant that the sole kunoichi of the team got to spend some time outside Yuro's carriage. We can't go through with this mission. The blonde hissed at him quietly. Shikamaru sighed yet again. That's not for us to decide. Shikamaru, Yuro deserves better than this. She insisted. It took me hours to get her to open up to me, but she's a smart girl. Too smart to be some pervy old man's plaything. Goodbye, sweet ignorance. I'll miss you, Shikamaru mourned. Well, unless you're willing and able to murder Asuma-sensei and become a missing nin for her sake, I don't see what we can do. The blonde recoiled at his sour retort and a hint of desperation entered her tone. We could talk to Asuma-sensei about it. Convince him to I don't know. Let that guard take her or something. Pretend that they got one over on us. A bunch of guys with no chakra training getting one over on a shinobi team. That was a good one. Maybe for an encore they could go give a wedgie or steal Kaya's panties right off her backside. Did Kaya even wear panties? Or at least one of those traditional fondoshi things? Or did she let the kitty breathe? A mystery for the ages. Ino Asuma-sensei used to be one of the Du's 12 fire guardians. He knows what the girl is in for better than we do and is obviously not bothered by it. Shikamaru pointed out, I don't think there's going to be any wiggling out of this one. Not for her and not for us. XXX. They had known that the attack would be coming ever since sussing out what the situation was. Young men had been risking their lives for women since the dawn of humanity. The odds of some lovesick guard deciding that Euro wasn't worth the trouble had always been low. The journey to the capital would only take about 2 days with a single night spent on the road. And so when the surprise attack came just before dawn on the second day, nobody was all that surprised. Conventional wisdom said that would be the optimal time to attack. Their sensei had taken the first watch and Shikamaru had been voted as the unlucky bastard to get the second. The client had insisted on Ino sleeping next to his daughter, so Choji got the third. But the reality of it was that all 3 genin were too tense to sleep at that point and kept watch together. With their senses strained for any hint of the coming attack, the rustling in the tree line immediately caught their attention. Kona shinobi were taught to move silently through the brush and to recognize when someone was failing to do it. So, their supposed ambushers might as well be banging pots and pans together. Shikamaru locked eyes with Choji for a moment and the chubby boy gave him a tiny nod to indicate that he had noticed them as well. Surreptitiously using the basic clone technique to replace himself, Shikamaru vanished into the darkness around him and began making his way behind the ambushers through it. Once he was in position, he waited for the fun to start, heart hammering in his chest from the adrenaline rush of his first real life or death battle. Honestly, he was feeling pretty wound up despite knowing objectively that these guys probably weren't any kind of real threat. They were just as nervous as him, though. He could see their hands shaking even in the pre-dawn gloom. They had to know that if their initial ambush didn't work out, that they were dead. That was some impressive loyalty to their friend. The sound of an owl echoed through the night, clearly fake if you knew what to listen to. And the 2 guys he was hiding behind knocked arrows to their bows. It was too dark, and they were too far to notice that his clone was being suspiciously still, not even breathing in its faint sleep. But things went even more sideways than that. The door of the carriage opened, and their charge ran out, rushing towards the tree line. Shikamaru was surprised for only a moment before noticing that Euro was moving a bit too quickly and smoothly for an untrained civilian in a heavy formal kimono. She ran right towards the source of the owl sound. The 2 guys in front of him panicked and fired arrows at his clone. Shikamaru emerged from the darkness and knocked both of them out with swift hits to the back of the head. Meanwhile, he could see Choji twist away from the arrow aimed at him with deceptive nimbleness. Chakra training conferred plenty of passive benefits, among them being superhuman perception and reaction speed. With the chubby boy knowing that the attack was coming, there was never any chance of it landing. He charged towards the origin of it, not even bothering with any of his clan's enjutsu. There was some yelling and the sound of a short scuffle, and then all was quiet. Shikamaru disarmed his 2 takedowns and hoisted them on one shoulder each. It was super awkward because they were grown men and he was a none too large 12-year-old, but he was at least strong enough to carry them. Shoji did the same for his own 2 and Ino brought what was likely the leader now back to her normal appearance. Nice work, Asuma praised, showing up out of seemingly nowhere. You handled that really well all things considered. Shoji and Ino pined a bit, but Shikamaru couldn't really bring himself to. Yeah, it was an ego boost to pull off their first successful counter-ambush. But now that they'd caught these guys, Shinobi-san, what is going on? Hanamura demanded to know, waddling out of his own carriage in his impractical kimono. I heard yelling, these 5 tried to attack us, and my students caught them. Asuma explained, gesturing to the ambushers, said 5 men were now waking up. The knocks they'd taken only causing short-term unconsciousness. I see. Hanamura said, a pleased smile stretching across his lips. So, you were brazen enough to try again. Hoshi the guy really was a Disney villain. He had the smug, gloating tone down perfectly. I couldn't let you sell off Ureo-chan like a cow in a marketplace. The now named leader of the ragtag band spat back. Fool, having one's daughter chosen to become the Dos concubine is a great honor for our family. I took you into my household and this is how you repay me. Hanamura sneered and turned to Asuma. Kill them. Shinobi-san that Shikamaru had known that they couldn't lug around prisoners that had no value and they couldn't let them go either. Shinobi pragmatism said that killing them was the best thing to do and that wasn't even taking into account the client's opinion on the matter. Ino visibly flinched at the demand and directed pleading eyes to their sensei. Useless. She had already tried to talk Asuma into arranging for a Disney happy ending to happen only for the Junin to be unsympathetic. This was happening. My students will do it. Asuma stated casually. This is as good a time as any to get your first kills. Of course, Junin were assigned genin teams so as to ease them into the shinobi lifestyle. Why would Asuma pass up on such a perfect chance to teach them a valuable lesson? Somehow, that didn't really make Shikamaru feel better. He could rationalize it all he wanted, but his formative years had still been spent in a culture that shied away from bloodshed. No amount of cold logic was going to stop his hands from trembling at the thought of murdering someone just to get in some experience doing so. Ino was just as distressed, albeit not for quite the same reasons. Her formative years had happened in a culture where killing was largely normalized, and those formative years were still ongoing. Besides, however, she also had a strong romantic streak, and it sat terribly wrong with her to be murdering Yuro's true love and then delivering her into a harem. Shoji was the least affected of the three of them, but that wasn't saying much. He was no more enthused about their sensei's command than his teammates. But sensei, no, Ino, Asuma interrupted firmly, staring at her with hard eyes. Shikamaru ran through his list of options. Argue some more. It would make them look bad in front of the client, and Asuma didn't seem like he would budge. Refused to obey. Asuma would just kill these 5 men himself and then possibly have them brought up for insubordination. Try to save them. 0% chance of success and a fast way to be declared a missing nin. If they got really lucky, Asuma would just kick there and not report what they did to the Hokage or the Shinobi Council, but they would still have dug a deep hole for themselves. All right, Shikamaru said, clenching his fist several times in preparation. Ino gave him a betrayed look, but he could only return one of helpless sympathy. This wasn't fun for him either, but compliance was the only realistic option. What is happening? A young female voice demanded. Yuro had woken up and was now stepping out of the carriage. Because of course, she would. Why should anything about this be easy? You should go back inside, Yuro-sama, the carriage driver urged. But the girl had already seen the 5 defeated men kneeling on the ground. Hatoshi? She asked, full of hope and fear. Yuro, the man spoke her name in tones of deep shame and regret. I'm sorry. The girl quickly figured out what was going on and tried to rush forward, but was restrained by the driver and her father. Hatoshi, best get it over with. Asuma sighed, lighting up a cigarette. It's not going to get any easier. Trust me on that one. Shikamaru stepped behind Hoshi before their sensei could get any bright ideas about further toughening Ino up by making her kill half of the star-crossed lovers duo and grab the man by the head and chin. He could have done it with a kunai, but that would get blood all over him. The academy had taught them how to properly break someone's neck. Sorry about this, he felt compelled to say, despite knowing how useless the sentiment was, and quickly twisted the man's head around before he could chicken out. A heavy sense of numb horror settled into his gut when the toppled over, wearing with a completely inappropriate adrenaline rush when his lizard hindbrain detected distress and identified it as dangerous. There was the sound of 4 men angrily cursing at him and a woman wailing in his ears. Ah, Yuro had apparently managed to catch sight of what was happening after all. Lovely. Being a Disney villain is kind of depressing, Shikamaru thought. Anonymely, turning to look at his shaken teammates. Well done, Shikamaru. Asuma praised, unperturbed. All right, you two pick one and kill him. I'll take the remaining 2. How considerate of him. XXX. They made it to the capital without further issue and delivered a grieving young woman to her future home life. The daimyo had been happy to see Asuma again and insisted on throwing a small feast in their honor. Shikamaru didn't expect to have much of an appetite. Even if he wasn't a paragon of moral fiber, this entire mission sat very wrong with him. Once the initial emotional impact of his first kill had worn off, he was able to rationalize it away because he wasn't a paragon of moral fiber. But the fact that he had been on the side of things was harder to deal with. He'd always been more of a don't mess with me and I won't mess with you kind of guy. Being hired muscle for a greasy political maneuver driven by a man's lust for young girls was very far removed from that stance. His teammates weren't happy about it either. Ino had been sullen and quiet ever since, and Choji had gone through his stash of snacks even faster than normal. Asuma had been kind of lukewarm on the mentoring, apparently preferring to give them time to process. The 3 of them had gone for a walk through the Dew's Palace garden while their sensei and the daimyo got reacquainted and now sat quietly in one of its gazebos. The mood was not great at all and none of them were up for talking. Ino just scooted close to Shikamaru and he threw an arm over her shoulder while Choji demolished the last of his stash. The peaceful atmosphere of the vaguely depressed Janine was interrupted by the arrival of a strangely frantic ill-looking brown cat with an obnoxious red bow pinned to its ears. The feline ran up to them and rather unusually tried to cram itself behind their backs. Given their location, Shikamaru had some suspicion as to who the cat belonged to. Tora-chan, where are you? A strident voice approached. Suspicion confirmed. The cat hissed and flung itself out of the gazebo, running as if hell itself was on its heels. Maybe it was. The manifestation of said hell waddled into view a couple of minutes later, layers of fat covered in expensive silk and thick makeup. Oh, you must be Asumik's genin team. The corpulent woman said, surprised to see them. I am Madame Shimi, the Dao's wife. A pleasure to meet you, madam. Shikamaru lied, fully understanding why her cat would run as far as Konoha in its attempts to escape this hambeast's affections. Did you see my darling Tora-chan come through here? She asked, looking around. Who is Tora-chan? He played dumb, subtly, signaling his teammates to play along. My cat. She's brown and has an adorable red bow between her ears. We haven't seen any cats at all. Sorry, madam. Shikamaru shook his head. Help me find her, the fat woman commanded. I will pay the cost of a D-rank mission. Of course, we aren't authorized to take missions. Shikamaru evaded. Only Asuma-sensei can do that. Oh, Zemi grumped, obviously displeased by the inconvenience. I'll go talk to him then. The fat woman waddled off, body jiggling with every step. He hadn't seen anyone this fat since reincarnating. It was almost nostalgic. The Akamaiki didn't count. They were all muscle beneath the chub. That poor cat. Ino spoke up after a few seconds. Traces of humor in her tone. A truly cursed existence. Shikamaru agreed. You don't think sensei is going to make us look for it, do you? Choji asked. Hard to say, Shikamaru frowned. I guess it depends on how pissy that tub of lard would get if he refused. It wasn't, after all, as if it was the money that would make such a mission unrefusable. I can't believe I was actually looking forward to spending some time in the capital. Ino huffed. A wretched hive of scum and villain. Shikamaru quoted with a grin. His teammates laughed a bit and the mood improved slightly. It was not to last, however, as their sensei found them about half an hour later, looking distinctly unhappy. Come on, kids, get up. We're leaving, Asuma said without preamble. Shikamaru raised a questioning eyebrow, making no motion to get up just yet. I thought we were staying for the feast and setting off in the morning. Plans change. The Junin responded shortly, making a hand gesture, urging them to get a move on. Did something happen? Ino asked, standing up and frowning in concern. Asuma grimaced under their expectant stares, but finally decided to clarify. You could say that, Yuro killed herself. Hair ornament through the neck. There was a moment of silent shock before Shikamaru replied in tones of droll sarcasm. Surely not. Who could have possibly seen that coming? Yes, indeed. Grieving, resentful people staring down a bleak future were usually too optimistic to consider suicide, especially in a culture where it was considered honorable in certain situations. Santo the sarcasm, Shikamaru. Asuma retorted irritably. We have to clear out so that the Daimo and Hanamura can cover up the scandal. There wouldn't be a scandal if they just left her alone. Ino muttered not quietly enough to go unheard. Ino, I wasn't happy with this mission either, but we don't get to pick and choose what we want to do. The Junin said in exasperation. If Shinobi only did missions they were comfortable with, the hidden villages would never survive. Then we'd be back to the Waring clans era and things would be even worse. And on that cheery thought, they quietly exited the capital, heading home with a missions that was technically completed successfully. XXX early on in his quest to make the Konoha 12 or 11, depending on Sasake's meltdowns friendlier with each other as a means of making the future less dicey, Shikamaru had realized a problem. He was an introvert and simply wasn't very good at maintaining social bonds. Fortunately, this conundrum had a solution, and that solution was to make the extremely extroverted, starved for contact orphan do most of the leg work in keeping the friendships going. Getting Naro to do so was about as difficult as getting water to flow downhill. Thus, Shikamaru was spared the exhausting and frequently baffling task of maintaining friendships with more than one or two people. All he had to do was nod and agree to whatever the blonde Jingeri suggested, occasionally offering amendments if something was too out there, and it was smooth sailing. That being said, this method did have its downsides. For one thing, it made the hyperactive blonde the de facto leader of the group. Good practice for his stated goal of being Hokage, but alright, is everyone clear on their role in operation? Smack some sense into Sasaki. Naruto asked energetically. That nice alliteration, though. I remain unconvinced that this is a good idea. Shino spoke up. Nah, it's fine. Ka dismissed the voice of wisdom. We need to bring that smug bastard down a notch or two. Shikamaru had gone over his memories, both of this life and what he could recall of the anime to get a handle on Sasake's personality and was a bit startled to discover that he actually wasn't that bad of a guy. In fact, he was remarkably patient and even-tiered. Aside from that giant brother-shaped berserk button he had in the brother-shaped tunnel vision. Then again, that was to be expected when said brother deliberately traumatizes you at a young age in some convoluted family redemption plot. Itachi was not a very smart man. They said he was, but he really wasn't. Or maybe this was a case of an idiot. Zavon Kakashi-sensei will never let us go on AC rank unless we can start working as a team. Naruto argued, implicitly agreeing with Ka, and Sasaki only works with us when he really has to. And there was the motivation for this mission. The blonde was getting frustrated that both teams 8 and 10 had gone on a couple of C ranks already while team 7 was still stuck doing D ranks in the village. Still, wearing masks and assaulting a Konoha Shinobi seems like a good way to get stabbed by Anbu. The bug user pointed out. It should be fine, Shikamaru said, ignoring his own misgivings. As long as Nar cleared it with the Hokage. You did clear it with the Hokage, right? Like Shino, I too would prefer to remain unstabbed. Of course, I talked to Gramps about it, Naruto said indignantly. Now get ready to gang up on him so that Sakura and I can jump to the rescue and show him the power of teamwork. It was a plan worthy of a child or perhaps the protagonist in a romantic comedy. Shikamaru didn't expect it to work, but maybe it would accomplish something because this lone Avenger stick of Sasaki had way too high odds of ending really badly. There was no guarantee that Orochimaru would go out like a chump the way he did in the anime, and Sasaki was kind of necessary for that whole business with Kaya. XXX Sash was heading to a training ground after yet another frustrating day. Their sensei was late as always and took them on a useless dank mission as always. His teammates, well, they weren't useless. He could admit that Naruto was decently strong and quickly growing stronger using that trick with the shadow clones, which Sasaki was still annoyed at being told he couldn't use himself. Sakura was smart, if annoying, with her persistent notions of romance. Sasaki had no time for romance, nor thought to spare for it. He had to avenge his clan, and he had to do it himself. Even if they were a team, Naruto and Sakura weren't part of his revenge. Deep down in a place that he didn't acknowledge even to himself. He was also irrationally afraid that Itachi would come back and kill anyone else he got close to. So he kept them at arm's length and trained alone despite numerous invitations to hang out or train together. Today was another such day, or so he thought, because he had barely finished his warm-up when he abruptly had to dodge a flurry of shuriken. Sasaki narrowed his eyes as 6 black-clad figures jumped in front of him. They had their faces completely covered, but by their height, they obviously weren't adults. 4 boys and 2 girls. What the hell was going on? Before he could wonder about it any further, he had to dodge again and fend off a Taiutu assault by all of them. He might not be able to see their faces, but he could recognize their styles just fine. Why the hell were his former classmates attacking him while disguised as some faceless enemy ninja? Sasaki didn't ask because this was actually a pretty good training. He'd never been up against so many people at once before and it was really hard to keep on top of things. He had to keep retreating to keep from being surrounded and had taken a nasty kick to the side when he tried to counterattack. So, he was now a lot more cautious. Sakura, look. A familiar, irritatingly loud voice announced in badly faked shock. Sasaki is being attacked by villains. Let's go help him. Right, Sakura said, managing to sound somewhat more genuine. Sasaki, however, could only jump back from his attackers and stare at his teammates in deadpan. All right, what's going on? He demanded. What do you mean? Sakura and I were just taking a walk when we saw you being attacked. Nar explained unconvincingly. It didn't help his credibility that said attackers had stopped and were now just standing there awkwardly. Ah, give it up, Nar, Shikamaru said with a shrug, pulling off his hooded mask. It was always a bit of a long shot that it would work. But you said it was a good plan. Nar protested. I said it was a plan, Shikamaru corrected. The blonde pouted and Sasaki had just about enough. What was the point of this? He demanded again. Those guys were going to jump you and then Sakura and I would come to back you up and you'd see the value of teamwork. Then Kakashi-sensei would finally start taking us on C-rank missions. Sasaki was stunned by the abject stupidity of it all and could only stare. I just went along with it because I really wanted you to start working with us. Sasaki, Sakura laughed nervously. Sorry, I was roped into it by my teammates. Shino chimed in. I just wanted to smack you one. Ka added his own brash justification. Come to think of it, he had been the one to get that kick in, hadn't he? Hinata just blushed and looked away. If Sasaki had to guess, she did it because it was Naruto's idea. Her inexplicable crush on the blonde idiot was hopelessly obvious to everyone except him. Well, this may not have gone as planned, but all's well that ends well. Shikamaru shrugged, his own teammates looking a bit sheepish. How about we go get something to eat together to commemorate this embarrassing episode? I have to train, Sasaki grunted. Alright, then. How about some team versus team training? The Naru refused to give up. You want to do something other than D ranks, right? Your sensei will be more likely to take you out of the village if he sees that you can work with your team. That gave Sasuke pause. It was true that the D ranks had been annoying and pointless, and he did want to go on more challenging missions that would help him grow stronger. It was just the fact that it required teamwork that bothered him. His revenge had to be done alone. So there was no point in wasting time training with his team. But he had caved in and worked with Naruto and Sakura during Kakashi's bell test when it finally dawned on him that just getting the bells wasn't the actual objective. He could treat this the same way. Fine, he conceded grudgingly. Nar looked shocked for a moment at his capitulation, which was kind of insulting, actually. All right. The annoyingly loud blonde cheered, jumping into the air with a fist pump. Sasaki already regretted his decision. XXX Ino was excited. Team 10 had a day off, and Shikamaru had suggested they have themselves a picnic. It was an idea that she had jumped on, but not one that could be carried out without telling their parents. Even if she was legally an adult now, she was still living with her parents, her very nosy parents. It was hard to keep secrets when your dad was the former head of torture and interrogation and your mom was the gossip queen of her generation. They had had the situation figured out almost immediately. So now their parents knew that they were dating. She had no idea what Shikamaru's mom thought of it, but hers was entirely too happy with it, while her dad looked like he couldn't decide whether he still liked Shikamaru or not. And it's going to be just a picnic? He asked, trying and failing to come off as casual. Pretty much, Ino sort of lied, feeling as if the bikini at the bottom of her backpack got heavier in response to the words. Shikamaru had asked her to bring a bathing suit, and she was both thrilled and nervous about the reasons. Enough with the overprotective dad routine, Anoichi. Her mother scolded and handed Ino a bento box. Here you go, dear. I know you two made your own lunch for this, but you can never go wrong with a few extra treats. Thanks, Mom. Ino accepted the box from her entirely too enthusiastic mother. At least one parent approved of her choice of boyfriends. And I want to hear all about it when you come back. What was with that weird smile? Come back before it gets dark. Her father called out one last instruction before she managed to get away. Ino shook her head and sighed in relief. Parents were so embarrassing. The agree-upon meeting spot wasn't far and Shikamaru was already waiting there, his own backpack on his shoulders. Hey, sorry I'm late, she said by way of greeting. Got held up by my parents. Don't worry about it. You're right on time. He dismissed in that same comfortably laid-back manner that he'd used for as long as she could remember, and took his right hand from behind his back. Here, this is for you. Ino's face began to bake when she saw the flower he was holding out. With the Yamanaka clan owning a flower shop, a flower was more than just a flower to her. It had meaning. Shikamaru was holding out a lily. Do you even know what you're saying right now? Ino demanded, severely frazzled. There was no way that even someone as cool as Shikamaru could be holding this out to her and looking so collected. Sure, he had the slightest hint of some embarrassment on his face, but other than that, he was as composed as ever. Beauty, passion, and drive, he asked more than stated. That's what your mother said it would mean anyway. Yes, it could mean that if you pick the right type of lily. Other meanings also included purity, fertility, and motherhood, and were not uncommonly associated with weddings. Due to them being in a relationship, it could, if you squinted a bit, be considered a marriage proposal to be given a lily like this. Shikamaru must have seen something in her face because he gave a long-suffering sigh and tilted his head towards the sky. Your mother played a prank on us, didn't she? That would explain the weird smile, like something between an evil grin and an attempt to force down laughter. Damn it, Mom. I'll get her back for this. Ino swore vengeance, still steaming red. Just make sure to keep her alive. We'll need a babysitter eventually. Shikamaru snickered. The bastard was making it worse. He always enjoyed messing with her, but this was going too far. Ino lunged for him with intent to harm. XXX. Well, being chased by his girlfriend in an embarrassment-fueled rage was certainly one way to get to their destination quickly. Fun, too. Ino's reactions were always good. Shikamaru was still a bit dubious about this whole relationship idea if he was being honest, but it would be nice to not be a complete social recluse in this new life. He could have waited for Tamari, but trying to stick to canon sounded both boring and dumb, especially when he already knew it would be different. Besides, he didn't do long-distance relationships and wasn't a fan of older women. Plus, Ino would grow up to be super hot, and it turns out that having puberty-level hormones made that feel a lot more important than it had been for a man creeping towards middle-aged. No doubt it would have made for a fascinating experiment on how much influence the body had over the mind. All right, we're here, he announced, stopping so that Ino could catch him. Huh. The chase had, ironically, cooled the blonde down, and she stopped focusing on him and looked at their surroundings instead. It was nothing too special, just a small clearing next to an equally small lake fed by a tiny little waterfall. But it was secluded and easily appropriate for a little romantic outing. With the land of fire being so heavily forested, places like this were relatively common if you knew how to find them. This is a great spot, Ino said happily. How did you find it? One of Naruto's exploration trips. Shikamaru snorted in amusement. The Jingariki had at one point wanted to explore all of Konoha's territory, and that meant a lot of blundering through the woods. I always liked this spot, so I thought I'd bring you to it. Oh, that's really sweet. Ino stammered a bit, then appeared to summon a reserve of anger. But I still need to punish you for embarrassing me. Fortunately, taijutsu wasn't her strong point, and she wasn't serious anyway, so he was able to maneuver her into a hold that was more of a hug, taking the opportunity to place a quick kiss on her neck. None of that now. Calm down. Oh, okay. Ino mumbled, relaxing. He could almost hear her blushing. It was going to be a real shame once she got used to this and developed a resistance. Good. Now, let's set things up. They laid out the blankets and food in comfortable silence, but pretty soon Ino started glancing at the lake with looks of nervous anticipation. So, were you thinking of having us do a little swimming? She asked, trying to portray cool confidence. Maybe get a look at me in a bikini. Oh, she was going to try teasing him. Was she an effort doomed to failure at this point? Shikamaru stared her dead in the eye as he responded. Yes, sure. Ino was only 12 at the moment, but she was coming along nicely, and it was a whole new world. When in Rome and all that, morality was contextual anyway. Well, he wouldn't actually do anything too forward with her right now. The plumbing still wasn't all properly installed yet for either of them, but he was more than willing to lay the groundwork. Ino's faux confidence playing the role of a tease evaporated like morning dew in sunlight at his unflustered reaction. Shikamaru smirked, fully aware that it was no great achievement to get one over on her when he had more than 30 years extra life experience to draw on, but not really caring. It was fun being the confident guy in his technical age group for once. I think we can agree that running all the way up here worked up a bit of a sweat, he said leadingly. So, how about we change and do some swimming to cool off? Ino narrowed her eyes at him, clearly fed up of being embarrassed and teased. Sounds good to me, she said casually. But no peeking or I'll kill you. Dolly noted. He drolled and dug his swimming trunks about his backpack, then started dressing right there. What are you doing? Ino stammered in surprise. Changing, Shikamaru retorted casually over his shoulder, dropping his pants and snickering at how quickly she turned around so as to not get an eyeful of his. It was just so ridiculous how big of a deal she was making out of it. There wasn't even anything really worth seeing on his 12-year-old body. No real muscle definition, and certainly not about his underdeveloped genitalia, which was turned away from her anyway. Or maybe all that time spent as a toddler with full cognitive function had skewed his perception. Perhaps no man passes unscathed through the trial of having his nappies changed or having his mother's friends cooing at his helpless body. Shikamaru told himself that the shiver he experienced was a result of the wind cooling the sweat on his body. How do I look? Ino's voice brought him back to the present. Bless her. Shikamaru turned around and took her in. She was blushing and standing there a bit awkwardly in a purple bikini that did a good job of displaying her developing curves and lean body. Still a 12-year-old girl, though, he deliberately gave her a thorough once-over, knowing that she would be insulted if it seemed like he wasn't enjoying the view. In truth, he was more interested in seeing what she would be like in a few years than what she was like now. Well, she demanded, blush intensifying. Shikamaru smirked again. Looking good, he said and jumped backwards, landing on the water. Come over here and join me. Not to be outdone, the blonde jumped after him, landing with the smallest of splashes. Although her footing wobbled a bit on the surface, she wasn't regulating the chakra flow to her feet with sufficient skill. Shikamaru frowned and looked at her feet. Have you been neglecting your practice? No, Ino asserted. Is that so? He asked skeptically. Then you won't sink if I tickle you. Don't you dare. The blonde took a defensive position. Too bad for her, because this sounded like a great opportunity to have fun while training, and Shikamaru was always a fan of completing multiple objectives with the same action. XXX. The sun was going down by the time they returned to the village, bathing everything in a red-orange glow. One could even call it romantic if one was so inclined. Hey, Shikamaru. Ino came the loud yell of greeting from a certain troublesome blonde. Even after years of work to socialize him properly and get it into his head that maximum volume wasn't always the correct volume, Nar was still prone to being too loud. What's got you so excited, Nar? Shikamaru asked patiently, having long since gotten used to it. Ino was a bit more annoyed at having their romantic walk home interrupted, but she was still in a decently good mood. It worked. Kakashi-sensei is finally letting us take a C-rank mission. We're heading out tomorrow morning. The Jingariki reported smugly. That's great. What's the mission? Shikamaru asked, feeling a smidgen of worry crawl up his spine. Canonically, the wave mission happened right after Team 7 did the Tora retrieval D rank, and he wasn't sure if that had happened yet. Some rich guy from the capital is going on a hotring tour across the land of hot water, and he hired a shinobi escort. Nar explained, his enthusiasm dimming markedly. It was obvious that he had hoped for something with more action. What? Ino squawked in outrage. Sakura gets to soak in hot springs on her first C rank. That's totally unfair. No doubt she was comparing their own first C rank experience, but Shikamaru was too busy thinking about the fact that Team 7 wasn't being sent to wave. Probably because his meddling had scrambled the timing. He had a real bad feeling about. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto What If stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.